what we've seen is global cars which sell in the key global markets, they just don't work in India.
There's two long members, cross members, so therefore a ladder to which everything is bolted. The engine, the suspension, the wheels, and that vehicle is fully drivable. That is what a ladder frame is.
There's DSG for a twin clutch, which Volkswagen says.
Right.
There's DCT, which Hyundai says.
Yeah.
There's
PDK.
and the PDK, which Porsche says. And there's DCA, which
Right.
Tata says.
Exactly. All the same dual clutch.
Automatic. Yes,
Exactly.
everyone's got their own kind of thing.
It's so funny because we have bad roads and therefore manufacturers give you SUVs, raising ground clearance to get over speed breakers and things like that. But then you tax them more by saying that, hey, you built an SUV, so now you're taxed.
The one downside of diesel is this, this tricky thing of the DPF being regeneration. Hello and welcome back to Deep Drive. We have now done 40 episodes of this podcast powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. And we are just overwhelmed by the response we've got from all of y'all. This series of podcasts, I have to say, has really taken us by surprise by the overwhelming buzz it has created. And of course, all the questions it has also generated. Now, we can't answer all of them. But what we have done is, like we did before, we are dedicating this episode to answer all your questions. It's a good way to kick off the new year, which is with you, the viewers. So I'm Hormazd Sorabjee and
I'm Sergius Barretto and wish you all a very happy new year. So, Hormazd, yes, like you said, we've got a lot of queries, a lot of questions. I've compiled many of them, and apologies to many of you in case we've not been able to cover some of your comments, but I think we've got a good sort of mix. Let's start, Hormazd, with the scoop that we broke, which was Maruti were going to do a series hybrid or a range extender hybrid on the Fronx. So some of our viewers, a lot of them want to know, in fact, what's the update? Everyone's sort of eager and excited about this one.
Yeah, I think Suzuki is going ahead with its series hybrid. I have to say that what we've not talked about, and we are breaking this over here, it could have hit a bit of a hurdle for the smaller vehicles. Because in the smaller vehicles, which is even right down to the WagonR, which there were plans to give a series hybrid in, packaging is turning out to be a challenge. To put a 1.2 petrol engine, which is the Z12V, that is the hybrid motor, which is going to be used for all the series hybrids. It's a 1.2 engine, 3-cylinder, so 1 cylinder less, does liberate some space. But to pack the battery, the motor, the controllers, all that into the small space of, let's say, a WagonR, bonnet or the engine bay, is proving to be a challenge. So a bit of a struggle over there. On the bigger cars like the Fronx, absolutely no problem. Technically feasible. They are going ahead. But Maruti Suzuki was relying on the scale effect of the series hybrid across all its models. So if they somehow can't pull it off on a WagonR, how will that impact the cost of cars like the Fronx, where they are ready to go ahead with the series hybrid, or in development they don't face any hurdles? So I think that is proving to be a bit of a challenge. But I think Maruti Suzuki they'll have to figure out some solution. I think what's interesting is that they're getting into this technology for the first time, so a little bit of learning over there. And clearly, to have this technical hurdle in the smaller vehicles like the Swift and the WagonR, where, let's say packaging can be a bit of an issue, I think they'll have to find some solution for that. But I think to answer the question, Fronx, as per the original schedule, 2026 is when the series hybrid for the Fronx can be expected.
Awesome. So that's then on track. Give a few months.
On track, this whole issue of the smaller vehicles having a challenge, I don't know how it will impact that, but as things stand, they are on track. So a Fronx with a 1.2 Z12V 3-cylinder petrol and a hybrid motor and battery is what we can expect.
Right. Hormazd, since we're on hybrids, there's another question here, and in fact, quite a few people did ask us this. What is keeping the Volkswagen group from introducing hybrids in India?
I think it's just cost. Frankly, it's just cost. Also, they don't have the relevant technology. I think they're more in plug-in hybrids. And hybrids only work if you hugely localize it. I mean, even after Maruti, Suzuki, and Toyota have localized the hybrid system for, the Grand Vitara,
Right. Yeah.
and the Hyrider, and of course the High Cross and the Invicto, it's still quite expensive. And if Maruti, can't get the cost or the delta or the gap between the standard petrol and the hybrid down to a certain level, there's no way Volkswagen can manage. As a fundamentally cost, you need scale. That's actually, it's not just hybrid, it's what prevents companies like this, which are marginal sales, from introducing technologies.
And a new engine for that matter.
And a new engine, exactly. A new engine, gearbox, you need massive scale to do that. You need the numbers. Without that, for the numbers you are selling, it just doesn't make business sense.
Any sense. Absolutely. Hormazd, we're talking hybrids. I'm just going to jump to the next page here because a lot of also queries that people keep asking us, why is there no diesel hybrid? I guess this comes from a lot of people, and they do ask ask me, imagine a diesel hybrid. Diesels are efficient to begin with. Why not put a hybrid as well? And I think the simple sort of answer, the first reason is, of course, cost. Diesels are more expensive to begin with compared to a petrol. You add hybrids, your cost now goes out even higher. That's one. The other fact is, very interestingly, is that in a petrol, a sort of hybrid complements a petrol's lack of low-end torque. So an engineer too is happy to use that, whereas in a diesel you already naturally have
and
low-end torque.
The fuel efficiency delta or difference is much wider.
Exactly.
Petrols are not as fuel efficient.
Not as efficient.
Adding a hybrid really ramps up the fuel efficiency dramatically.
True.
So the fuel efficiency benefit,
correct,
is probably would be negligible in a diesel.
Exactly.
A diesel hybrid vis-a-vis regular
petrol
diesel.
hybrid. Yeah, and not for the cost that it would come.
Correct. So just to sum it up, a petrol ICE and a petrol hybrid, the difference in efficiency would be much bigger than a standard diesel and a diesel hybrid. And don't forget, diesel as a technology no one's investing in. It's it's seen its years.
Exactly.
It's seen as a dying technology. So I think for anyone to invest in a diesel hybrid today, it would be crazy.
Absolutely. In fact, I think Mercedes did have one on the E-Class, a diesel hybrid called the Blue Sense, but I don't think it ever made its way to India as well.
No, and I don't think even globally there was any impact because diesels are inherently fuel efficient. They compete with hybrids in certain cycles.
Exactly.
So I think they don't really, it's not very complementary.
So, there's another query here which kind of related. Why does Maruti not have an AMT in CNG models? And a couple of users have asked, why do companies not do AMT and CNG? And, I'll take this one. There are a lot of people online who think that there's some incompatibility issue. Tata, of course, then recently proved them all wrong because we do have the Tiago and the Tigor that have, AMT and a CNG. So, yeah, technically you can do it. You can have an AMT gearbox with a CNG, no problem. Maruti are probably not doing this for cost, and perhaps you might know more here as well.
Not doing it for cost. Maybe their target audience customer doesn't want it. Some of them are in fleet, so they don't need it at all. So I just think it's customer preference.
Customer preference.
So technically, there's no issue.
Exactly. Hormazd, we did a podcast. We had Perseus in with you on classic cars, and a lot of people wanted to know about the Defender. I guess a lot of Defenders around India, the old Series 1, Series 2, etc. They want to know about the Defender. What's your thought on that? I guess people are really keen beyond just like the German ones. What about Defenders? What do you think?
I think, the old Defenders, the Series 1, I think really iconic, legendary vehicles. Really known for its ruggedness, reliability. I mean, still so many of them still running around in the Northeast. They still use them. I'll be honest, they might even be more reliable than the current Defender. I've been known to have a lot of electronic glitches. So I think it's as a classic, it is one of those absolute iconic vehicles to have. It is. How do I say? I mean, you have visions of it going across continents, whether it's in Africa, going across the Darien Gap in the Americas. So I think clearly, I mean, it is a vehicle that is quite aspirational, even as a classic car. Doesn't quite have the absolute, let's say, value of what a Merc would have. Definitely not. But I still think that this is a big part of automotive history at the time. I mean, don't forget. It just brings back visions of phenomenal overland trips. In fact, that first overland, where the first trip let's say a car from a Series 1 came from London to Singapore through India. So that was, something which is, again, it was done by a Land Rover. So I think really they are, it's so synonymous with iconic and, these phenomenal overland trips.
And Hormazd, parts availability, servicing it, that's what also a lot of people want to know. Is it easy in India for a Defender?
I think it's,
Relatively speaking, let's say.
Yeah, I think today,
Wow.
like Perseus said, the easiest cars to really, as classics, are Mercs. I think Defenders, just by the sheer volume that there are, you can get parts, you can improvise, use parts from other products. And clearly we can see that we are running in the Northeast,
Right.
in difficult
As daily runners.
as daily runners.
So-
Obviously, there's a certain level of service they can have, and they deliver to their customers.
What was another question? And this one, in fact, a lot of enthusiasts have been asking, saying that, we said the new Skoda Kylaq is a great car to drive and things like that. Why not have the 1.5 liter engine in the Kylaq? Because it's the same platform. Technically, the engine bay would be the same. I guess the answer is the sub-4 meter rule, right?
Yeah, it is a sub-4 meter rule, because clearly with a 1.5, your excise jumps straight 28 to 43% in this case. It would add a lot of cost. Plus, the 1.5 in any case is imported along with that DSG gearbox. So that again makes it even more expensive. So it just all adds up and cascades to making it just phenomenally expensive and smack into Kushak territory.
Right.
But I honestly feel, they could have had a small volume a VRS model, because this really kind of lends itself to that, because you've got a different engine output, and in that compact package, you could have some takers and really position it very premium, not just with the engine, with a sportier suspension, good interiors, sportier interiors, and really make it a proper VRS in that sense. Kylaq, RS, VRS, whatever, it would be, I think you would get, let's say, small volumes, but I'm sure there would be some takers.
There would be some
But the problem is, again, small volumes for a company like Skoda, which is part of Volkswagen Group, it just doesn't work, because the development cost for even something small, even something like adapting this engine into the Kylaq, would go into millions of euros. So automatically it goes out of whack. And that's really been the bane of this group, is just that development cost, validation cost is disproportionately costly to for the Indian market and Indian customers.
True. It's a pity, actually, because an RS would be fantastic. A WRC edition, perhaps. I mean, we know
Exactly.
Skoda have done this.
Absolutely, WRC edition would be phenomenal. I agree with you. I think that would be great. And at the end of the day, I think people want these cars in small volumes, but not you can't sell them in large volumes at all. But it's really the small volume development which becomes a hurdle.
So, Hormazd, staying on the group, we also broke this news of the ASIN source stock converter gearbox that they're looking at. And somebody wants to know as to why they're doing that and why not a DSG gearbox.
I think clearly, the torque converters are fighting back in terms of efficiency. Look, the DSGs have an advantage in terms of fundamentally efficiency, which is important for CAFE. But I think the torque converters are getting more efficient, and the losses are less, because in the end it's all hydraulic. They're fluids. They manage to minimize the losses. And frankly, for the Indian market, torque converter to me is the best gearbox. We've said this before.
We've said this, yes.
Yeah, a DSG is great. I remember my drive in a Kushak up Ambin Ali Ghat going to Mahabaleshwar and coming down. It felt fantastic with those paddle shifters and really enjoying the quick shifts over DSG.
Right.
Felt really fantastic. But how often do you drive like that? You're normally driving in the city, and the smoothness of a torque converter is just fantastic. Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, it's the automatic gearbox. And people say automatic, that's what you tend to think of. Right?
That's right. And they're coming out with the AQ 300, which is an 8-speed.
Right.
We've said this before. It's slightly cheaper because then the AQ 250, we don't know why, but we suspect because it's being made in scale, right, and the whole group is shifting to it. And I think it's even being manufactured in Brazil, so that also adds to the scale effect. It will still be imported, but it will be cheaper. And
so
that
more
must-
gears, but cheaper.
That's right. Good. It'll be a good situation. I think it'll really enhance the appeal of the VW Skoda products.
Skoda products, yeah. Almost on gearboxes, in fact, there's a couple of people that have asked us, and we get this pretty often actually, is what is AGS and how is it different from AMT and all these various nomenclatures. Frankly, I mean, I'd love to take this on because
AGS is a automatic gear shift.
is the same as an AMT. It's marketing driven. I mean, we've seen this before. People don't like to call something the same because, okay, Hyundai says that, so we'll say this. They keep tweaking around stuff like that. So yeah, it's an AGS to answer the query.
So there's DSG for a twin clutch, which Volkswagen says.
Right.
There's DCT, which Hyundai says.
Yeah.
There's
PDK.
and the PDK, which Porsche says. And there's DCA, which
Right.
Tata says.
Exactly. All the same dual
Dual
clutch.
clutch automatic. Yes,
Exactly.
everyone's got their own kind of thing.
Absolutely.
That's right. It's all marketing driven.
Exactly. No, I in fact, there's a funny little anecdote. I remember on a torsion bar, some brands called it a torsion bar, some brands called it anti-roll bar, some brand called it anti-roll torsion bar. And there was one guy who came up to me with, I'm not going to say who, with a brochure draft and said, we want to call it the anti-torsion bar. And I was like, no, you can't do that. He said, why? Everyone's doing different combinations of the word. And I was like, no, but this one combination can't work. So yeah, absolutely. It's marketing driven. Hurus, there's a question here on the Nexon diesel. It uses an LNT system to meet the emission norms. And most cars, at least, and we did a big story on this, how Tata managed to do this without going to the SCR sort of
putting the AdBlues.
So
Selective
the
catalytic reduction is what SCR.
Exactly, yeah. So would this also face a clogging issue is what everyone wants to know, which is what we are seeing on some of the AdBlue kind of cars.
Well, no, it's two different functions completely. LNT is more about sorting out oxides of nitrogen. So what it does is it traps these oxides of nitrogen, and in let's say a rich cycle phase, it kind of let's say reduces it, or let's say takes out the oxygen and just comes down to harmless nitrogen. That's what it does.
Right.
So it's got nothing to do with the DPF, which is handling a separate pollutant, which is the particulates and the soot. So the DPF traps all the soot, which results in particulates in the DPF. And the way to get rid of that is by regeneration. I mean,
burning off.
Yeah, burning off. So you can have passive regeneration, which is the engine heat itself. But if you're not, driving in stop-start conditions, you have active regeneration where you inject some fuel and that kind of, lights off and burns off the soot, which you need to burn off the soot. It can be that the LNT cycle, the way it is, raises the exhaust temperature a bit more in certain cycles, which in a way improves the passive regeneration. But otherwise, they're two separate functions. It has LNT and SCR, also selective catalytic reduction. That's to take care of the dirty NOx oxides or nitrogen, whereas the DPF takes care of the particulates, which is again harmful. So I think that's So frankly, there's no connection between the two, and you will still have to regenerate the DPF to burn that soot.
To burn top.
Where after it traps all the particulates in the filter, in the DPF.
Yeah, so I think that's a thing we have to live with the new era of emission norms, and if you want to do diesel, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a diesel, that's the one downside of diesel is this, this tricky thing of the DPF being regeneration, because constantly, if you are doing very, let's say, short mileages or short runs rather, where the engine can't heat up, it can cause a problem. Right. So we always say if someone looking at a diesel, makes sense if you're doing really long distance trips, but for short city drives, it's not really worth it.
So absolutely. Hormazd, there's a question on, let's stick with engines, on e-turbos in petrol. A lot of people actually keep asking us, why are people not looking, or more people not looking at e-turbos in petrol engines? And, given that you could have low turbo lag and things like that. And, well, yeah, I mean, I'll take this one. The e-turbo, it is there. Mercedes in the C. Now they've downsized the AMG, the C43 and the C63.
The new Porsche 911.
The new Porsche 911. Both use
hybrid
e-turbos.
E-turbo.
Exactly. So brands are using it. The answer to the question is very simply because it is expensive. Obviously, you're adding another component, which is a motor.
It is very, very costly. Yeah.
Exactly. To spin up the the sort of turbo, so there's no turbo lag. In an expensive car like the Porsches, the Mercedes C63, you can absorb that cost, and the driver is willing to sort of pay that because he's getting an instant response. In a smaller car, because a lot of people ask us saying, in terms of also efficiency, it's not really the case because you're adding too much of cost for getting rid of turbo lag. Also, if you're not a hybrid, which is quite interesting, it doesn't make so much sense because what you can do is reverse the polarity of that motor when the turbo is running off the exhaust gases and it's actually charging the battery.
Yeah.
Whereas here, if you don't have a hybrid, you could add an e-turbo, sure, you'll get rid of that little lag.
Right.
But then after that, the motor is just doing nothing. It could be generating electricity to charge up a battery. So really, you'll see typically e-turbos in engines where, first of all, they're performance engines and where you have a hybrid because that's maximizing the benefit.
And there's one more thing, don't forget, e-turbos need a 48-volt system
To run off, exactly.
So a lot of cars, the cheaper cars, don't have a 48-volt system. I mean, they have mild hybrids and all, but again, most of the cars run on a standard 12-volt system. So I think it's just a cost issue.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense in a mass market car.
True, absolutely. So, Hormazd, there's a question here on, let's move things completely down a notch to the Alto segment. In fact, a lot of people after our Alto podcast, had questions saying, why are people leaving this segment? Hatchbacks. Well, what's happening to this segment? Why do we not see any? Nano was the cheapest car to buy in the market. Some more people didn't buy it. So what's happening to the hatchback segment?
I think that it's very clear what is happening is there are two things. One is obviously buyers are becoming more aspirational. They can afford more expensive cars. And the two things make them jump to, let's say, a segment above. Obviously, the Alto is a very basic car. And also another factor is the Alto itself has become expensive. Yes. A car which is like, almost 4.5, 5 lakhs. Who would have thought that, 10 years back? The Alto, I remember always in the 2-3 lakh bracket for a long, long time. So that's also become expensive. We know why they've become expensive. Material costs, emission regulations, all that sort of thing. Safety, we have to package them for, let's say, crash structures, all that sort of thing. And clearly that's really added to the cost. And we've had these two big regulations, BS6 and also the safety norms which have kicked in finally by 2019, which have really increased the cost in these cars. And regulations constantly go on adding costs. So the Alto itself has become expensive. And, it's a bigger gap between a two-wheeler and an Alto now. And also I think a big competitor or big rival to the Alto is the used car market, right? I think a lot of people might opt for, let's say, a more premium used car than just the Alto. Alto is also very small, is very functional. I think, people or consumers in India have become far more aspirational in the last 5 years than before. And they want, to have something a little bit more plush, a little bit more premium. And that's why I think the whole budget car segment is suffering, struggling. Yeah. And I think the only thing that's really keeping it going, if you look at it, is the sub-4 meter rule. If you remove that tax benefit on that, I think that whole segment would collapse.
Will collapse. Absolutely. In fact, you're right, Hormazd. Like in a lot of markets, the entry level is served by the used car market.
Yeah.
So I think India could be headed towards that space where
that's right.
It's just what you would do. You'd buy a used car first.
And the used car market is becoming more organized. You have good options out there. There's getting more transparency. So I think that trust factor is increasing. So clearly used cars are becoming, let's say, a real, a good alternative to these new basic budget cars.
Exactly. Hormazd, moving on to Mahindra. A lot of people have asked us about the Thar. There's a lot of excitement on the Thar. It's our car of the year as well this year. With the 5-door that is. So what
Thar rocks,
the Thar rocks, What people don't know is that, with exactly that, with the Thar rocks now coming in, will we see more of these suffixes and prefixes to the Thar, and will Thar be like a mother brand?
Yeah. To be honest, it's anyone's guess. I think one thing what, Mahindra, what we cannot understand is their nomenclature and their naming strategy. It's just all over the place. You've got XEV, you've got XUV, you've got TUV, you had KUV.
Right.
Every possible
which end in O.
Yeah, some
have to end in O.
Some end in O. Then you had the issue with Indigo with 6E, which actually I think was quite ridiculous because I don't see any connection at all. I hope Mahindra win that case against Indigo, because for me, I mean, it's real hypocrisy because Indigo took the Tata Indigo name for its airline itself. Right. And Tata did, from what I understand, Tata Motors did file a case against them and lost, which they managed to retain that name. That's what I understand. So anyway, but coming back to the nomenclature, difficult to say. Look, Thar is an iconic brand for Mahindra. The Thar 3-door has done well. The Rox is also flying. So I think they would use that name in future products with that same base vehicle. So an electric Thar, maybe the Thar E or whatever. But I don't think beyond that they would use that name. So I think it will be limited. But as I said, with Mahindra, then nomenclature,
Right.
alphanumeric sometimes not. It's a bit of a khichdi, I would say.
It is. The sad part, though, is it actually stems from some amount of thought. Like I remember the XUV when it came out, it was supposed to be the monocoques or crossover.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's very soon let go and diluted, and you have sort of now too many exceptions to the rules that were being created.
I mean, if you were doing a standard alphanumeric thing, the way like BMW do with the 5 Series and, stuff like that, the 5 is a size and the rest is the engine or powertrain or whatever, So I think you would have imagined an XUV 900, 700, 500, 400, so it's all... but that's not been the case. So you've had XEV, you've had,
So, Hormazd, there's also a query, and we've had a lot of this on Toyota bringing the Prius to India, because it's been, I think, the poster for hybrids, and hybrids are getting sort of a lot of spotlight on the Indian market. Do you see the hybrid coming to, the Prius coming to India?
See, they had the Prius in India for a while. They discontinued. It was too expensive. I don't see the Prius coming at all because it's a global car. And what we've seen is global cars which sell in the key global markets, they just don't work in India from a cost perspective, from a concept perspective. They don't necessarily have the space, the feature sets, what we want. It's a different customer altogether in India, which is not a global customer, to be honest, an Indian customer. So again, which I've always been saying, products which have done well globally just don't work in India. And I think that Prius would be another case of it. It would just be too expensive. They can't make it at scale. And, again, if they launch it as a CBU, CKD, it'll be very small numbers. They've burnt them fingers trying that, and I don't think they'll come on that again. They've got their own local hybrid strategy, which they'll be pursuing.
Right. Moving on to a technical one on what's the difference between monocoque and body-on-frame or ladder vehicles. We keep saying this. Yes, I think I'll take this one. Is a monocoque is where basically the body shell of the car, every component, the engine, the suspension is bolted straight onto the body shell. You won't have a ladder frame. In fact, the best way to explain this is trucks and buses. You would have probably seen these plying on the roads where there is no body, but you have a complete vehicle able to fully function. There's a driver there sitting usually with his muffler and protected from the elements driving the car. So there's 2 long members, cross members, so therefore a ladder to which everything is bolted, the engine, the suspension, the wheels, and that vehicle is fully drivable. That is what a ladder frame is, and you bolt the body onto that. In a monocoque, if you take away the body, all the components fall apart because there is nothing else supported to it. There are benefits both ways. I think obviously load bearing capacity is more on a ladder frame, and we've seen that with trucks, buses still sticking with that. Monocoques are lighter in weight. You don't need a passenger car to have, for example, 2 long members across taking on a lot of weight, so you can get rid of that component. Lower the weight, lower the height as well, things that you are welcome in a passenger vehicle, right? And I think even SUVs today are going in the monocoque way. The Defender, you've driven that extensively, right?
So yeah, absolutely. I think the monocoque, what's driving fast adoption of monocoque and even iconic vehicles like the Defender moving away from ladder frame to monocoque is weight. Because today in a world driven by efficiency, CAFE regulation, CO2 reduction, weight is an enemy. You've got to reduce that. And the weight can be to the order of a couple of 100 kilos. So, but there are advantages to a ladder frame. And we've seen that with the appeal in vehicles like the Rox, the Fortuner. There's a perception that they are tougher. And theoretically, they can be tougher. They can take a lot of beating. I think one other big advantage is that the ground clearance is static even with load. In a monocoque, because you load it up, your ground clearance can reduce. So theoretically, you always get better ground clearance in a chassis vehicle. Sits much higher off the ground. But then again, dynamically, it's never as good as a monocoque because the center of gravity is higher. So there are pluses and minuses. I think in India is one market where ladder frames still have an appeal, as we've seen with a lot of the Mahindra vehicles. In fact, Mahindra's best-selling vehicles are all, let's say ladder frame. You've got the Scorpio, you've got the Thar Rocks, and you've got the Bolero. The only exception is the XV 700, which also sells well. And the Fortuner also still has a strong market. What about the Innova, which really is the gold standard for ladder frame vehicles? The old Innova Krista. So there are pluses and minuses, but I think 10 years on, ladder frames will disappear from SUVs.
From the passenger.
Exactly, because I think, these march towards getting more and more efficient. Monocoques will become more stiffer. They'll be tougher. They'll be more robust. And they'll probably be as good or give the same properties and character as a ladder frame in time.
Right.
And they're already doing that, to be honest, in a lot of cases.
True. Hormazd, this one is something that I'm waiting to hear your response to, is what is Autocar's view on bringing back the iconic cars like the Padmini, the Ambassador, and the 800 as full electrics? Well, I know you don't like the Ambassador so much. So.
No, I'm never a fan of the Ambassador.
Right.
I know everyone loved it, a horrible car to drive. I think, it's great. I think they would sell for nostalgia value in small numbers. But to make those cars in small numbers is just not feasible at all. So, you'd have to do a lot of development. You'd have to put up a line to manufacture them. Forget that. You'd have to design it, tool up, crash. Firstly, making them crash worthy would cost hundreds of crores. So, just not cost effective to do that, because the market for that would be very, very small. There'd just be, people living in the past. A lot of people of my generation who want a slice of that past. But I think the vehicles themselves, you could have a modern version of it, but they would still, retro vehicles, I don't think they have too much of a demand, not in India at least. So it's just not viable or feasible. There's no business case to make them at all. So, I mean, people might retrofit them, not entirely legal. And people do that.
So, yes.
I mean, you've got Jag E-types with electric motors in them in UK, and they've got a market for it, but they sell at some crazy prices. And in India, I don't think you could command the price, it would cost for a company to make this car. So it's nice to have, but it's not going to be possible.
Not going to be possible. Okay. What was another car that's probably nice to have? Polo GT TSI. It was an amazing hot hatch. Why did VW stop selling it in India?
So I think the problem with the Polo GTI, or the last one, again, it was a European car. European car means very expensive. Volkswagen, right till the end, were using 700-800 euros on that car. Very little local content. They were made to certain requirements and specification, which could run fine in Arctic conditions, minus 30, minus 40. You need certain materials for that. Doesn't make sense over here. In fact, I think they learned from the mistakes of that, and you got cars like the Virtus and the Slavia. So, and also hatchbacks traditionally don't command that much value. So you can't even price them sufficiently enough to cover your cost, because people aren't going to pay for that. So I think it's just was impossible for Volkswagen to do. That's why I think hatchbacks as a rule are very difficult for anyone except Maruti and Hyundai to a certain extent to do, because only they've been able to crack that formula of, let's say, very high volume, operating on small margins, and managing to kind of, cut costs where customers don't mind it, and giving the features where they would it would appeal to them. So I think hatchbacks is dead for a lot of these global OEMs, not only in India, but I think globally also that's happening.
Absolutely. Hormazd, there's another question, and I want to take this one because I had actually done a column on this some time ago. Is do we think that the SUV obsession has something to do with our road conditions across cities and municipalities? If roads get better, will sedans have a chance? Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'd written a lot about this, unfortunately, because it's so funny, because we have bad roads and therefore manufacturers give you SUVs. raising ground clearance to get over speed breakers and things like that. But then you tax them more by saying that, hey, you built an SUV, so now you're taxed. Yeah, I just didn't like that whole concept. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, yeah, you're right. People have been asking this. It is, of course, it's also to do with the perception, not just the perception of sitting high. You get a better commanding view, so people do like that, a better image.
Right, yeah. I think absolutely right. I don't think that's the only reason they buy the SUV for the bad roads, but it just makes it just so much more practical. These sudden speed breakers which pop up from nowhere, I think that's a real issue over here. Potholes, you have big, large wheels to cushion them. And as you rightly said, I think it's just, the kind of road presence of an SUV. And the fact that SUVs are now driving more and more like cars. So you really have the best of all worlds in an SUV. They're spacious, they're practical, easy to drive, they have performance. Earlier they were very unwieldy. The ride quality was terrible because they had, very high unsprung mass, a lot of them ladder frame. That's all gone now. Basically, frankly, a lot of the SUVs are hatchbacks on steroids. They're mainly crossovers. A lot of them.
Kylaq is a good case in point where we were just talking about there being a RS or a WRC version. Who would have thought
on an SUV? And even some of the, let's say a Fronx, for example, is fundamentally a jacked up Baleno.
Right.
With a different face and all, But I think that's really what the customer wants, these crossovers, SUVs, whatever. So I think it's just the market pull is that.
Absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, I think, yes, with better roads, perhaps sedans would have had a better chance, maybe. And I really do see that as something that we should be addressing, because even fuel efficiency, something that we are chasing. SUVs, no matter how well you engineer them, they are going to be a little heavier.
Because they're high, their frontal area is more, they generally have more drag, they're heavier, the rolling resistance is more because of the wheels. So it's bad for, efficiency and bad for, in a way, even the environment, because they're fundamentally, have more CO2, unless you have an electric SUV, of course.
Right.
But yeah, correct. So I think, in the end, customers is king and he wants SUVs.
Exactly. Hormazd, there's a question here on Honda, that says, as a Honda enthusiast, so we have a Honda enthusiast asking us this question, saying Honda have used the same LCD's 1.2-liter four-cylinder engine in the Amaze, Jazz and WRV. Why did they discontinue the Jazz and the WRV but kept the Amaze?
Well, I think again...
segment demand
from our last question on hatchback.
Exactly.
There was no demand for it. Expensive to make, margin much smaller. I mean, I don't think the manufacturing cost for Honda between an Amaze and a Jazz is that much different. In fact, it could be that a Jazz might be more expensive to make, because if you take in the gas struts at the back and the lifting tailgate and all, sometimes that's much more than just an ordinary third box of a boot. Yeah. But you can charge more for an Amaze. So from a manufacturer's point of view, my compact sedan might even cost me less to make than my hatchback. But I can charge more to the customer. So my margin is that
value is higher on the sedan.
Perceived value is higher on the sedan, so that much more. So again, comes back to the same question. Hatchbacks, they're just quite low down in the pecking order as far as customers are today.
Right. Hormazd, there's a question here, and I think this is from the podcast on Mahindra, perhaps, where I think you said that, a particular chassis they were looking at, or a platform, was too heavy for India, the Tivoli. What did you mean by that?
So I think that Tivoli, it's a car made for global markets. Again, coming back to my global car, not suitable for India. So, I mean, they are heavier because, there are certain reinforcements, there's certain torsional stiffness, which is required over there, not necessarily required over here. And from what I understand, it was quite heavy. They kind of knocked off about 70 kilos or so when they kind of adapted it for the 3X. So it doesn't necessarily mean the crash is compromised. But, there are areas where sometimes it's a bit too over-engineered for our roads in terms of maybe high speed or whatever. I think, that's the whole issue. The Tivoli was really, it sold in Europe a lot. Actually, it's quite a successful model for SsangYong for a while, but not really, let's say, ideal for the Indian market as a platform. So while Mahindra have made it work with the 3XO really well, I think, there's still a bit of a cost penalty over there. And that was one of the projects they were doing with Ford, was to have a Creta size vehicle, which the Tivoli, they've not been able to take it to that level. But obviously that project fell through, so they don't have that. And they have to make do with this platform, which is now on the 3XO.
Right. Hormazd, another question, and people keep asking us because we use this acronym very often, CKD, CBU, and SKD. So, yeah, I mean, the quick answer to that, CKD is a completely knocked down kit which a manufacturer brings in, assembles a car in India. CBU is a completely built up unit where basically, as the word goes, you just import the whole car as is. SKD was a semi knocked down kit where there was, Hormazd, in the past a differentiation, but I understand from now there isn't too much of a differentiation between
that's right.
semi-knockdown and a completely knockdown, right?
Yeah, I think, look, I think the way there are different levels of, let's say, local assembly over here, and obviously they attract different levels of taxes, and this is where people get into gray areas and conflict, like Volkswagen had, even BMW had, with the tax authorities, because what is a CKD, what is not a CKD. So it has to be properly defined, and there are proper definitions for it. But just broadly to say, if the car comes with an engine, in it, it's and everything else out, it's or let's say an engine imported fully from there, people may not consider it fully as a CKD. So a CKD is at least the engine is assembled here, and you get a lot of the other aggregates locally, or very often a way to bypass that, you got a supplier who's actually importing them, but then if you source it from it becomes local. And then then there's full manufacturing where you make the cars fully over here, where you've got everything from the paint shop, from the stamping the steel to painting the vehicle, all that sort of thing. But typically in CKD, if you see a CKD plant, it's a proper, we have proper plants making CKD kits, because you pack them in a way in a pallet, which then can be transported. A little bit like a Lego kit, but that's how it is. And the importance of a CKD plant, we know, because I think the Superb can't come to India as a CKD because they shifted the plant from Czech to Bratislava, and that plant is not CKD ready.
It can't make CKD.
So it can't make.
They don't have a area to create those.
Exactly. Yeah. And then if you want to create one, that's a cost. And India is the only market which wants CKD Superb. Volumes are again too small. So clearly that's, but I think, it's a good thing to encourage local manufacturing more and more. And that's how the taxation also has been structured, that with, as the local content goes higher, the taxes get less.
Right. So Hormazd, I think we've covered nearly every question from what I can see of what we've gathered. There is one which is I guess the last one for today. Then what is the problem with the sub-4 m concept in India?
I don't know if there's a problem, but I think...
Yeah, we've said it's actually a good thing maybe sometimes for our...
I think there's, let's say, a debate on it. Clearly, on one side, the debate is India is the only market which has this regulation, which means the products made under sub-4 m have limited export potential. Or you cannot bring these, there are few sub-4 m products to bring into India. But on the flip side, the historic thing is India was a small car market. It was to be a hub for global small car manufacturing, which it was and still is to a certain extent. I mean, if you see the exports going out of Maruti, Hyundai had a lot. You had Nissan doing a lot at one time, but that's all wound up right now. So, I think the small car market globally is disappearing, and India is the only one. And even in India, it's weakening. So the question is, do you have this rule or not? I mean, my view is there is a logic in having it, because I think there are three bad things about a car. One is safety, or let's say, they kill people, so you need good safety. The other is they pollute the air, so you need good emissions. And the third is they clog our streets, congestion.
Yeah.
And congestion and the road space they take up, you need smaller cars. I mean, I personally love small cars. I just don't like big cars personally, because for various reasons. And I think, so the logic is that, you got to tax cars that take up more road space more than cars that take up less road space. So that really is the logic. But again, on the flip side, it's not a globally aligned regulation or rule, and that creates problems in global competitiveness. not for our market, for the industry, for manufacturers as well, because, the ones which have global products are at a disadvantage against this unique products designed for this unique regulation, unique only to India.
Right. So clearly it's a debate and discussion that will sort of rage on, Hormazd.
Yeah.
Not our podcast though, because that's the last of our questions.
Well, that's great. I think it's been fun, sir. Just enjoyed taking questions from all you readers. Keep them coming. We'll try and answer them as much as we can. But once again, this is our 41st episode, 40 were over, and really, we've been really amazed and really grateful for the phenomenal response we've got. Do keep watching, and remember, we are on every Saturday at 11 a.m. So do click on the bell icon so that you're notified. And if you're driving and you just want to listen to us, you can catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Thanks for watching. See you again next week, same time.